The Lebanon Springfield Airport has been in operation since about 1968, and today the former chairman of the airport board, Colonel George Herter, is with us. The Colonel just recently left that position. We want to thank him for coming by today. And Colonel Herter, if we could, you've been sharing with us some of the experiences you've had in flying. You've served in World War II, you say,
yes.
And just tell us about some of the things that those of us that weren't there, we see films of it today. We don't really, we get a better understanding at least seeing those, but you were there. What was it like?
Well, I was in a B-24 outfit, and when I arrived, it was a very hush-hush secret type thing. Nobody said beans to anybody else about what's going on until we had our top secret briefing. And it was top secret. You couldn't talk about it at all because we were working for an OSS outfit, the forerunner of the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
And our job was hauling supplies and dropping agents behind the lines in Germany, France, primarily France, Denmark, Norway. I made one trip to Norway. I'll never forget an old Dane that came to us one day. He said, boys, he said, when you get to the target, he said, fly low and slow, but don't circle. In other words, get in there and get out. Don't call attention to we're dropping stuff.
Right.
I flew about 15 missions of that type, and as the war progressed, the need for this sort of operation became less. So our group was asked to start flying with the Royal Air Force at night in their bombing missions, and our group was a diversionary force. My particular squadron was equipped with a new product, the forerunner of radar, called Mickey. And you could, it was a primitive radar is what it was. But we were equipped with this, and we would go out, and our whole outfit was supposed to be, as I say, a diversionary force for the Royal Air Force. We would have a target here, and the main force of the RAF would come in right behind us, and then they would turn and go somewhere else. But we were supposed to alert the fighters and the ACAC people, try to make everybody think that this is where the big effort was. And what we would do with this radar, we could be a little more selective on where you drop things. And what we did, we dropped what they call TIs, target indicators. They were flares, and the force behind us would come, and the bombardier would zero in on the flares, let his bombs go. And that was an interesting outfit too, organization. I guess I flew about 15 missions like that.
And you were saying before we went on camera today that there was one occasion that got a little scary, I guess.
Well, actually, we got shot at all the time.
Right.
The one that well, I should say I remember two of them in particular, because I remember a lot of them. The time we went to Norway, for example, we were supposed to drop, there were 5 airplanes with 8 men in each one of us, with all kinds of ski equipment, snowshoes, whatever. And we were supposed to drop on a frozen lake on the border between Norway and Sweden up past the Arctic Circle. And we had to fly from our base in mid-England, called Harrington was the name of the place, up to Scotland, get gas, then go out over the North Sea, and beautiful full moon. We like to fly in the full moon with these agents and stuff. And the deal was, unless you could definitely identify the target, you don't drop people. Now you might drop supplies, and you
can run the risk there.
Run the risk there. But anyway, that particular night we couldn't find the target, and we came back with our load of eight men. Matter of fact, I think 3 of the 5 aircraft couldn't make a positive identification, and one of them did drop theirs, but it was on the other side of the lake, and they ended up interned in Sweden. Of course, that wasn't a big sin. They lived the life of Riley for a while. But another night, another target on that, when I was flying with the RAF that night, that time, we went to a place called Duisburg on the Ruhr Valley, and I never saw so many searchlights in my life. They were just going back and forth, ack everywhere. And the way you're supposed to react when one of these searchlight beams comes in your direction, you turn and dive through it, because he didn't have time to stop and come back. But once they pinpointed you, they got you in that apex. All they had to do was fill that with ack, and you were a dead duck. Matter of fact, one of the guys from our squadron was hit that night off to my right wing. I can remember that. But my last mission, my 29th mission, one more DFC and go home, that type of thing. We were flying a diversionary raid on a town that was a suburb of Berlin. Gotten the name of it right now. But anyway, when we turned off the target, we lost our number 3 engine and were unable to make it all the way back to England, because pulling more power on the 3 engines eats up more gas, and we didn't have enough to make it back. So we asked for emergency landing instructions, and we were diverted to a place called Liège, Belgium, and a fighter strip with pure steel planking for the runway. And it had been raining at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we landed in a crab, and normally that airplane would straighten out, but this time it didn't, and we went off side of the runway and hit a 5-foot embankment, and I felt the nose wheel break off, and your first reaction is put your arm up, and I pivoted on my elbow, hit the window with my back, out the window, on the ground, started running, and turned around, and there the pilot was standing in the hole I made in the side of the airplane, helping the rest of the crew out. But fortunately, there was an ambulance came along in about 10 minutes and picked us up, and I was the only one injured in that particular incident. But I was X-rayed and flat on my back in bed within 2 hours in an Army hospital, and that was on the 15th of April. And on E-Day, 8th of May, I was in a hospital in Paris waiting to be air evac to the States, which I was. I arrived in Mitchell Field up in New York on May Lamott's birthday, and May the 11th, and the next day I was ringing the doorbell at my mother's house in Louisville on Mother's Day.
I was going to ask, what was her reaction when she opened that door?
Oh, I had called her, told her I was in Mitchell Field,
okay.
But she didn't know. In fact, I was assigned to Fort Thomas, and the reason we ended up in Louisville is because air evac did not fly after dark, and they had more patients for the convalescent hospital at Bowman Field than they had for Fort Thomas. So they came to Louisville to spend the night, and the next day they took me back to Cincinnati, and I went to Fort Thomas. But she was surprised, to say the least.
I bet. That's a pretty nice Mother's Day gift.
Oh, it was, yeah.
For both of you. You know, we always wonder, what can you give your mother on Mother's Day? That was pretty good then.
Yeah,
that's hard to beat.
On flying status within a year, and flew out of Langley Field for a while, then the war ended, and I was stationed over at Fort Knox, and I flew AT-6s and C-45s over there. That was a reserve organization. They'd go around different places, Lexington, Stanford Field, Bowling Green, to take aircraft to pilots who wanted to fly on the weekend, see?
Oh, I see, okay.
And I finally ended up going to Japan in 1949. And I was over there when the Korean War started, on June 25th, 1950. I shouldn't say I was over there. I was back in the States, but my wife and kids were over there. I had ferried a C-46 to Ogden, Utah, and then went down to San Bernardino to pick up a Goonie Bird, a C-47, to bring back to Japan. I opened up the newspaper in the Officers Club Sunday morning. War in Japan, war in Korea. Itazuki, the hub of operations. Itazuki was where I was stationed, because they had a fighter outfit there, and of course they were the first ones to strike back, was the fighters P-51s at Itazuki. And I got a hold of the people who were fixing up the airplane to take back, and I said, hurry up, I got to get back over there. So I was back within a week, and day after I got there, I flew over to Daegu, hauling supplies, and I did that for 2 or 3 months while I was at Izuki, and then I was transferred to Tachikawa into a C-46 outfit, where I flew 750 hours and what they call combat hours, just all over Japan, Korea, and what have you, and back to the States.
Say, that had to be an experience. And
Oh, it was.
Now, you tell us, too, that it didn't end there for you.
No. Of course, I went to the Squadron Officer School down in Montgomery, and they kept me as an instructor, and I became a general's aide there to the Commandant of the War College. And when that time was up, I went to Pakistan, where I was Assistant Air Attaché, and we had a C-47 as our airplane to ferry the ambassador around, and I flew all over Southeast, or the Mideast, India, Bangladesh, which at that time was East Pakistan. I got to Afghanistan, Kabul, and Nepal.
I was going to say, we've heard that old adage, join one of the services and see the world. You
Join
certainly
the Navy
did.
and see the world. Yeah.
Join the Air Force, you're going to see it, aren't you?
And then I came back, and I was at Command Staff College at Maxwell. And then I got a real good job. I was on the Inspector General team of United States Air Force Security Service down in San Antonio. And we had units all over the world. And I guess I was there 4 years, and of that 4 years, I spent a total of 1 year on temporary duty, going here and there. We'd be gone for 30 days at a time. So my wife lived in San Antonio longer than I did.
You were never at home, right?
That's right. During that time, the Air Force came out with an edict saying if you were not in a cockpit position, you don't have to fly anymore. So this was back in 1962. And so I didn't have to fly anymore. And then when, after I left there, I was a base commander over in England at a place called RAF Chicksands, which is south of Bedford. And they had a reorganization there after about 1.5 years, and I went down to High Wycombe, where I was a deputy base commander. And that was until the end of my total 3 years. Mm-hmm. Next assignment, Utapao, Thailand. Never heard of Utapao. That was a B-52 base down on the southern part of Thailand. And I went out there as a base executive officer. When I arrived, my base commander said, "You want to fly again?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Sign here." And I was checked out in the Goody Bird again, and I flew almost 300 hours in Southeast Asia. My last flight, I landed the DC-3 or C-47 at Bangkok, Thailand. And then I came home, and I was assigned back at Maxwell, where I was director of assignments for 5 years until I retired in 1974. That's my career.
Did it, while you're going through that, it's like everything else, I guess. It seems to go slowly, but now that it's over, it
was fast.
It flew. It literally flew.
That's right.
Okay. Colonel George Herter with us. We'll be back in just a moment. His career with flying is not yet over. It may be with the military, but he's been very involved in our local airport. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment right after these messages.
Good.
Now, we'll be going to probably your mates on this one. And if for some reason they were to slide down, don't worry, just set him back up and we'll go right back on. Back with Colonel George Herter. He has had to me, sounds like a very exciting career in the military. Flying the planes. As a child, I grew up watching the, what do you call them, piston planes?
Just prop jobs.
Just prop jobs, okay.
Compared to jets.
Right.
Yeah, right.
But you know, we've come a long way with airplanes. We have come a long way with the Lebanon Springfield Airport, and that has been your most recent contact with flying. When you started, and if you can, what some of the events are that have taken place during that time.
I'll be glad to. Back in 1995, Dave Horrigan asked me if I would like to be on the airport board. Mm-hmm. I guess you might say, being a fellow who likes to do things for the community. After all, I'd been a president of the chamber for a year. I'd been on the chamber for 3 years, and I've been involved with the Historical Society as a treasurer there for a few years. But I feel like that a person should give to the community what he can. So I said, well, Dave, sure, go ahead, sign me up. And I was supposed to replace a fellow whose term had not yet expired, but he had resigned. And I say that was 1995. Murray Walker was the chairman at the time. And for a year, I went to the board meetings, and various things were going on. One of the items of interest was they wanted to build a new T-hanger. 30 years ago, when the airport started, they had 2 5-unit T-hangers, and they were always full of aircraft. The runway had been extended to 4,000 feet. And I decided that, well, once I got elected chairman, that was after the first year that I made me chairman, we decided to try to get the runway extended to 5,000 feet. What had happened back in the mid-90s, the HMB, Hayward, Meyer, and Bolin, an engineering firm in Frankfurt, probably at the behest of the FAA, drew up what they called an airport layout plan. It was more or less to what you would like to see your airport be. And they came up with a nice new taxiways. At the time, we just had one taxiway. This is the runway, 5,000 feet. They were going to extend the runway to 6,000 feet, 1,000 feet to the east, put in all these extra taxiways, even going to relocate the entrance road around this way. Total cost, $7 million. And you can imagine how far that went. Just to extend the runway 1,000 feet to the east, $2 million, because there's a deep ravine here that had to be filled up. We have to buy more land and everything like that. So even though we had requested this from the FAA, nothing ever came of it. And in 1997, I think it was, when Jim Tucker had taken over as the airport manager, the former fixed base operator left, and he came to me one day and he said, Colonel, he said, why don't we just extend the runway 400 feet to the west and 600 feet to the east. He said, that'll give us our 1,000 feet. We actually have 800 feet of overrun here now, and we have 500 feet here. I thought, well, that's not a bad idea, so I started investigating and worked with the FAA. Had to get waivers, because you're supposed to have a 500-foot overrun, but there's a thing called a displaced threshold. In other words, we have what they call a displaced threshold on this end of 200 feet, and a displaced threshold on this end of 150 feet, I believe. That means when you're coming into land, you're supposed to land that far down.
Right.
But most pilots, like myself, shoot for the end of the runway. But take off, no problem. You can go all the way to the end and zoom down there. So for jet pilots, especially on a hot August afternoon, 5,000 feet, he has no sweat. He can get right off the ground. In fact, we have a jet aircraft that John Boswell, the Kentucky Cooperage, has been coming in here all along. But we don't have jet fuel for sale, so he can't take off with a full load. So he was all right.
Okay.
And anyway, we got the waivers for that. There was another waiver for our object-free area. It's supposed to be so much, and I've forgotten what else. But anyway, we got the okay from the FAA to do this. We calculated what it would cost, $340,000. We put in requests for the money to the Director of Aeronautics up at Frankfurt. It was included in the fiscal, or not the fiscal, the legislative session of year 2000, and it was approved. So we said to Mr. Pace, who's the director, I said, when will we get the money? He said, oh, you won't get the money till next year. And I said, here it is, May. If we wait till next year, we can't start for another year. So with a little talking to the right people, they gave us the okay to go ahead and start last summer. They said, I said, we can borrow money. We've got a little money. In fact, I had gone to the fiscal courts of Marion and Washington County and to the city councils of Lebanon and Springfield, gave a little spiel of why we needed the extra runway. We also needed extra money, and they were very supportive. Each one of the entities gave us $25,000, so we had $100,000, and our credit was good. And we had to borrow some money from Gene Spraggins up here. But anyway, they gave us the okay to go ahead and proceed, even though the money hadn't been allocated, so to speak.
To you yet.
It was approved but not allocated. So we got the job done. As you know, we had the governor down here on October the 10th. He cut the ribbon,
and a beautiful October 10th.
That was a pretty day, yes it was.
You took us on a tour. We all got on a school bus and drove the length of that runway. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
I guess the first runway I've ever been on. And fortunately, that thing didn't have wings.
No, it didn't have wings.
But it's interesting to see this.
But you recall, the airplane landed while we were going down the runway.
Yeah, you had to remind me of that.
Yeah, we pulled off to the side, and he was a little bird, so he didn't bother us at all. But anyway, we got the job done. In fact, we didn't get the money until March. And included, in addition to the extension of the runway, we had a couple other features. We have at the end, on the left-hand side of each runway, this side and this side, as you approach, we have 3 little lights that are called visual glide slope indicators. And when you're coming into land, if these lights are in the right position, you're right on course. If things are different, you know whether you're too high or too low. That was another $60,000, but we went ahead and did that. We also have an affair with the Runway Lights, where in days gone by, they would come on at dark and they'd go off at dawn, burn all night long. Now all a pilot has to do, click his clicker on the microphone, those lights come on, they stay on for 15 minutes and then they go off. That was another just...
Technology.
Technology, that's right. But to make a long story short, it cost us more money than what the state gave us. But I say, we had the $100,000 from the governmental entity, so it worked out fine. Mr. Pace came down. He's the director of aeronautics before the governor came, and he said they were going to have a program in their office for airport development, and his program would give us crack repair, seal coat, and paint the stripes on it, $37,000. Which was nice. We did it all last year. We still don't have the money for that one. But it's in the bag. We'll get it next month probably. But a lot of these things take time. They take a lot of, I hate to use the word politicking, but that's what it is.
Call it what it is.
you gotta talk to the right people, and if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
That's what you have to do.
And the reason the Director of Aeronautics has this money is back in, I think it was the 1998 legislative session, there was a bill called House Bill 444, in which the The idea was that money that used to go into the general fund that was collected from fuel tax on aviation fuel and jet fuel would go to the Division of Aeronautics for airport replenishment or repairs and making them better.
Right.
And that's how come them to have the money for this other job. In fact, I think there was 5 other airports that were shared into this thing.
Well, it's pretty obvious this was a long undertaking. You know, maybe some of the people that have worked on it prior never got to see the fruition of their works, but had they not done what they did, you may have not gotten to this point. I've got to ask you, though, Colonel, looking back now, are there any things that you'd like to see looked at for the future, any improvements that you'd want to see?
Glad you brought that up, because that was in the back of my mind. Before I left the board, I submitted a letter to the Director of Aeronautics for $65,000 asking for a thing called AWOS, A-W-O-S. That stands for Automated Weather Observation System. In other words, talking about technology, they've got this thing now that they put it up on your field and it will measure the rain, dew point, wind direction, altimeter setting. We don't have a weatherman out there. But this is an automatic weatherman. Pilots can, what's going on at the Lebanon Springfield Airport? Well, the wind is so-and-so, and the ceiling is so-and-so, and your altimeter setting is such and such, and they can get the weather. And as I say, this technology is something.
Well, and how appreciative are the pilots when it comes out? I mean, when you're flying a plane of any size, not only is your life at stake, you got an expensive airplane at stake too.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I mean, this visual glide slope, for example, at nighttime, coming in off of the VOR over at New Hope, that's our instrument letdown system. They can come in, and when they can see the runway, or if they can't see the runway, the closer they get, they'll see these lights and say, hey, listen, I'm too high or too low. It might have saved that bald fella's life here 7 or 8 years ago when he was coming in off there. That automatic weather system would have helped a lot because he could have gotten the altimeter setting. I think that's what they finally decided. He had the Bowman Field altimeter setting, which could be different from here.
Right.
And when you set that in, you can be a couple hundred feet off just by the barometric pressure.
I was going to say a very tragic incident that occurred.
Because he was coming in doing fine, but he just ran into the ground
too low
before he should have.
Well, you know, the airport, for those that may have not been out to see it, how open is that to the public for just coming and looking at their airport?
You can, of course, we've got gates. I talked about that electronic security gate. You can't get through there unless you know the combination. You punch into the keypad because we don't want people going back in there and hunting. Of course, we got no hunting. There's plenty of deer out there. I looked out there one morning and I looked to the east, and I bet there was 25 deer at the end of the runway.
Well, now you've just brought up something. What about the danger of night flying, let's say, and having something like that? Is there any?
Well,
you're just up a creek.
You're up a creek. That's right. You just hope there's nobody on the runway. But talking about nobody on the runway, I forgot to mention that last year before last, we put up a fence from the administration building along the road all the way down to the gate between the road and the runway to keep hot rodders from getting on the runway at night and doing a high-speed run. Guess ain't nobody does that. But a couple of years ago, after a heavy snow, I went out there one morning and you can see the tracks where they went right up on the runway. So that was
if it's there, it can be done.
The thing we did here a couple of years ago was get Marion County Water out there. Heretofore that they just had the water off the hangar into a cistern, and they had a filtering system, Clorox or whatever it was. We didn't drink it. We carried bottles of water in there to drink, but that was all right for cooking and washing clothes and stuff like that. But we were hoping that Springfield would come our way 5 years ago, but they're just now doing it now. So we went ahead and made arrangements with the Marion County Water District, and T. Ray Mattingly gave us an easement across his property off of Horn Lane. He goes all the way to our property. We got a pipeline about a mile and a half all the way to our place. Cost us $11,000. Our money. We didn't get any money from anybody else, but we're not supposed to make money, and that the taxing districts of Marion and Washington County give us money, and we're supposed to spend it for the betterment of the airport. And that's been my philosophy the whole time I was out there.
I'll tell you, one trip to that airport, you can see, if you were there 10 years ago and you go there now, a lot of difference,
yes.
A lot of changes.
We're proud of what we've accomplished these past 5 years, 6 years, and hopefully we'll continue to do it. However, we've kind of reached the max. For example, 5,000 feet's fine. Go to 6,000 feet, we can't do anything to the west end because we'd hit the road highway. And to go east, we'd have to buy property and
fill in that ravine.
Yeah, that ravine. And besides that, with a 6,000-foot runway, FAA requires 100 feet wide. In fact, they require for 5,000, but we got a waiver for that. But for 6, we wouldn't get it. And you have to have a 1,000-foot overrun on each end. So we're talking about an extra 1,000 feet this way because we couldn't use the other end. And 5,000 is enough. Matter of fact, airplanes are getting bigger, they're getting faster, but they're also able to stop sooner now with reverse pitch. You know, you land an airplane, you hear it go, he's putting that thing in reverse. So it slows it down. That's right, reverse the engine. So I think as far as the length of the runway, we're happy with what we got. And we do have jets coming in there. I got these pictures. I don't know whether you can see them, but maybe you can crank them in there. 2 years ago, 1999 I think it was, all of a sudden we saw all these jet airplanes out there, and we found out there was a cattle auction, Davis cattle auction up past Springfield someplace, and these fellas came in from Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, South Carolina, and they're all here for that cattle auction. And that's a picture of the jets sitting out there that day. And that was the second Saturday in April is when they would come. But this year they came on the first Saturday because the second Saturday was Easter Saturday. And we had a real big one this year. Okay. This one right here is a Citation 10. And I mean, that rascal is big. But
it looks like it would seat several people.
It's several people, yes. We have a program that's been in operation now for a couple of years. On the first Saturday of every month, we have what they call a fly-in. And fellas fly in from Bowman Field, Taylorsville, Campbellsville, Bardstown. It's usually the same guys come all the time. And we give them breakfast. Bacon and eggs, sausage, biscuits, and whatever. And they sit around and tell lies and just have a good time. They come in and get in about 9 o'clock and they're gone by noon. But one Saturday here, I guess 4 or 5 months ago, I was out there and I saw 13 airplanes sitting there on the ramp. So, matter of fact, these fellas for the cattle auction came in on the first Saturday. We weren't expecting them, and it was a windy day. We only had 3 of our regular guys, so they got to eat. So it works out fine.
Okay. Well, Colonel Herter, we want to thank you for coming by today and sharing with us the information you've done. So we appreciate the work you've done.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I've welcomed the opportunity or the honor, whatever you want to call it, to serve the community, and I hope that I've left that airport in better hands than when I got it, and it'll continue to flourish out there. It's nice for the community. In fact, in Tom Lund's little magazine, Lebanon and Marion County, he's got a nice little article in there in the latest edition. John Bramall took the picture, and it shows it how it was right after the runway was completed, but we hadn't gotten around to the marking yet. You can see where all the excavation is going on. Matter of fact, you can see a jet airplane sitting there and another airplane getting ready to taxi out on the runway. So our airport is active. And with this midline air freight bunch out there, I didn't mention them, they've been here since the fall of 1998. They haul freight here to there. They are from Tuscaloosa to Detroit, whatever.
Wherever it needs to go.
And they have a Beech 18, which is a twin-engine aircraft. They also have a Aztec, and they use that for passengers. They recently bought a Cessna 172, I guess it was, and they give flight lessons. You can rent the aircraft, whatever, and it stays pretty active. They had 19 students last summer, and they just recently bought a DC-3, and they fixed that up.
You've gone full route then, haven't you?
I keep threatening I'm going to go ride with them one of these days, and maybe I will.
Okay.
But it's been fun. I can't complain. I enjoyed it, and I hope I enjoy my retirement.
Colonel George Herter retiring the second time. Retired from the Air Force, now retired from the Lebanon Springfield Airport Board. I don't know, they may come back and ask you to do it a little bit more. We're not sure. But we thank you, sir, for coming and being with us.
It's been my pleasure.